actions. That occurred in May while Wanda was still president. Now what had happened here, what I thought was very unusual about this is, and again, these are additional controls that I'm looking to put into place, is that a check request went through twice. And I'm just using it as an example, and I'm not saying anything wrong here, and I'm not accusing Wanda of anything. It was just that the current control as treasurer, what I'm asking to be adopted would never allow this to happen. What we have here in the second one where it says, on 5/7 through the accounts payable, a $33.52 check for Wanda Rivera was put through for the green wristbands. But unfortunately, on that same date, what happened was that $33.52 for Wanda Rivera was already paid. So now what we have in our general ledger is we have a double entry for something that somehow or another got processed twice. Didn't get paid for it twice, but it got processed through normal channels twice. To me, that's a problem. When you pay for it, when it's over, this way I'm suggesting that we put the controls in place so it never even leaves our office or is allowed to get to that bookkeeper. There's no reason why we should be voiding checks. Okay, the other thing that I came up with in May when I was reviewing the general ledger, and mind you, I've only been in office for a couple of weeks, and this is not my highest priority, but in order to feel comfortable in the controls and the way we're keeping our records going through this, there's some things that need to be strengthened, which is why I'm just pointing these out. Okay, so now let's look at the water, how much water we use. And that's a very silly thing, right? You wouldn't think that that means anything. But when I look at the bills that were actually submitted on the general ledger, what you do is you see the three bills here, $469, $73.56, not a big deal, right? But when you look at our published financials that go out to us as homeowners, we're the one who's looking at this because we want to review it. We're entitled to this information. What we see out there is they charge $1,123 for water that month. I don't know. Is that okay? I don't think it's okay. So I'm asking to strengthen the controls that we put on here to make sure that before we do this, we make sure that that financial statement that goes out accurately reflects what goes on through our books. So this is another method of checking and verifying and strengthening our internal controls.
Before you go to this page, can I just so I understand it, the first entry you're saying was an issue that, I don't know how much was the expenditure of the beautiful mailboxes? 21,000?
For what? No, it was double that. That was only half.
Okay, what was the?
It was about 45. Okay. So I didn't get the second half.
So the point is the 45,000 was spent in 2014 instead of 2015 as per the reserve study.
Part 1, yes.
Okay. Point 2, as I understood it, just for the audience, is that the use of funds out of catastrophic capital improvement catastrophic fund was not shown on the normal financials, and your inquiry or query is going to be about whether or why we're using catastrophic funds in the ordinary course.
Correct.
Okay. The next entry that you talked about is a double entry, which is understandably cause for concern. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for.
Right.
Okay. The last one is $615 or so approximately was apparently invoiced, but there's showing a payment of $11.23 on the financials.
On the financials.
Okay. I just, because not everybody in the audience has the sheet that we're looking at. I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
What's the difference?
Yeah, but did you ever
I know.
look at the difference? Okay.
These are things, okay, what I did initially is I went through as much as I possibly could just to get a feel for what I'm looking at, how, what areas of concern do we have? Where do we need our internal control strengthened? Is everything fine? Is everything getting processed properly? So this is just like a cursory overview. This is without digging into anything. I don't have any facts. I don't have any documentation. These are just questions that are raised based on this information, based on our records.
Okay, so
fine.
Okay, I just wanted to go through that and make sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to point out in this sheet?
No. There are other things that you have it, it's great. There are more, and they're similar to this in nature. The other thing, there was one other thing, which is the pool. Now, the pool, I have to tell you, by looking at the reserve study, this pool was scheduled for a $30,000 expense in 2020, and we incurred it in 2014. So So I'm not exactly sure why we would do that, or why we would go against our own reserve study, but this, interestingly enough, came out of ordinary and necessary expenses. This was not out of the reserve. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. When isn't it? You know, there needs to be some consistency. If we're collecting reserves, we're required to document why we're collecting them. We need to know how much we're collecting, how much we need to put away, and so it's very clear and a very good understanding of what we're collecting them for. And when we use the funds for that project, that's when those funds come out of reserve. Reserves are not there to be used as another operating account. And it appears that this is exactly what we're doing here.
Did we ask why we redid the pool? Has that question been raised to anybody yet?
Not yet.
Okay,
The problem is it came out of ordinary and necessary.
well, I understand that, but we're using that as a point without having a tax. That kind of bothers me a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not
And you're
saying.
right, and you're right.
You're gonna allow us to speak when she's done, I hope. Okay.
I'm saying it now that we're not that we're throwing mud, because that's not what's happening here. We're bringing things to light that you've found, but we might be bringing things to light that aren't necessarily needing to be brought to light. It could be just a simple clerical, or there could be a simple answer that, yeah, they found out that the diamond bright was cutting kids' feet, so it needs to be repaired. And we didn't do due diligence in asking those questions with bringing this. I'm sorry. I mean,
Don't be sorry.
you know I support
Don't be
you,
sorry.
but I have a little bit of an issue of raising something without having the background behind it.
And the second part of that is, it didn't come out of the reserves,
I-
as you would expect.
I understand
It comes
that.
out of the ordinary and
I
necessary.
understand that, but there's a difference between saying that the pool repair was brought out of the wrong account, as opposed to the pool repair was done early and brought out of the wrong account when the pool was necessarily needing to be done early. I figured that due diligence needed to be done before that was brought in front of the board and brought in front of the community.
Excellent point.
Okay.
May I say something?
Yes.
Okay, the reserve study is like an estimate, just like the budget. I mean, they can only come out and say, well, this is, what we think. But sometimes things have to be done earlier, for the homeowners. I mean, there was a lot of repair that was necessary there. And yeah, the committee, we get together, the finance committee, and we find things that are not properly coded, and we try to, correct it. And the mailbox definitely was supposed to come out of reserves, and if it's not, that could be fixed. Those are things that when we get together in a group, not just one person making an analysis, okay? It's a group of people, because sometimes I make a mistake, sometimes another person overlooks it, brings it to my attention. We work as a group. This was a secular type of opinion, very objective. Yeah, there's always room for improvement, but the committee hasn't had a chance to go over it and say, hey, bookkeeper, this is not properly coded. Christine sometimes makes mistakes that we catch. Sometimes she catches my mistakes. That's why we have the finance committee to do these things.
It's a very good point. And let me also make sure that everybody understands. When I was talking in my statement earlier about me wanting to have a review done, the point is that the review by KS is to flag items for further discussion. The next step is to go to the finance committee, who presumably, according to what Jose has told me, is the one that spent a lot of time, effort, energy preparing the budget, etc. So this is the first step in the process. I don't want people to get the wrong impression, but my point is that this lady has been under the microscope and on the radar screen of a lot of people, and I think they need to understand that this lady is doing her review that she promised that she would do to the people that put her in this office. We'll take public comment at the end, sir.
Okay, just one other thing I want to point out. Number one, this occurred in May. And number two, I specifically sent you an email and Dawn asking you why this was left off our financial statement. And I sent it more than once. This is 6 months later. This has still not been corrected. What account was the mailboxes charged to, and why is it not in the financials? and I don't have a conversation with them.
Excuse me, I thought we were keeping this.
Let's stay on point. But that's, as I understand it, that's an example of an item that needs further discussion.
You know, when you see
Correct.
something that's
Correct.
not properly coded,
Correct.
it's not like, etched in stone.
Correct.
That's why
It can be
people-
amended, it can be
Yes,
revised.
definitely. It's
Correct.
like the accountant would probably bring it up and say, you know what, this wasn't properly coded. This has been a little bit of an issue that Christina's had in properly coding stuff. We've gone through this many times with her, and it has been an issue since the beginning of the year, and it got better, but it's still every month it was something, either from your, department or office, or from accounting, which it happens. I don't know why, but it does, and they're accountants, and they still make errors that we, the homeowners, have to, overlook and correct sometimes. This is what we do.
Right, and all I'm suggesting is that we try to correct this on the front end by putting in stronger internal controls, and I don't want to. What I'm getting at now is kind of, I really don't think the audience at this point needs to see this, only because there's some information on here that probably, I just have some additional questions. And what I have here, first of all, is I have an order that was used for Palm Beach Plantation assets that in fact was purchased by a board member and with the board member's name on it, and in fact the HOA is not recorded here as owning anything. So, and used a personal credit card. That would be the first one from HH Direct. The other one, this is something I absolutely need to eliminate. We need to eliminate as an HOA. We certainly don't want an individual owning HOA property.
So what is the point? Just so I can understand it.
The internal controls that are
The
lacking.
board member did what, as far as you can tell?
Well, as far as I can tell, she, at the very end here, was purchasing items not owned by the HOA and getting reimbursed for them, and then directing funds that were paid for commissions to be categorized as rent.
Okay, so again, is this a classification issue, or is this?
You can say that one more
Yeah.
time, I didn't catch that myself.
Okay, what's happening with these homes that we own, okay, is we have board members taking out contracts in their own name, not the HOA's name, so the HOA has no standing to pursue this. The other thing is when they pay commissions,
Contracts for what? Talking about
Service.
service contracts
service
for
and
rental property?
appliances.
Okay,
Right,
Service and like warranty services?
yes.
okay.
And then we also have a situation where we have had the incoming tenant pay for commissions, and we book it on our books as rent. It says paid for first month's rent, and then take it out as expenses. And you'll see that where the checks are. I
Is
know
that an accounting function that you, again, this is another flag that you would have to look at how it's
Absolutely.
classified? Okay.
because, for me, if I see that somebody is paying somebody else, I don't want it recorded on my books as rental income. It's not rental income.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, and then when I went to go verify these, all the homeowner records have disappeared from the office. They're no longer in the office. And that to me is a big issue.
What records are you talking
For
about?
all the homes that we own, they were in the office. They're now missing. They're totally gone.
Christine? Do you know?
No, I just suggested that we have to look again and see if we.
When was this discovered?
What's that?
I went through every one of them twice. They're gone.
So, do we have electronic copies of any documents or files for the rental properties that we own? Does personal service maintain those?
They will have some of it, yes.
Do you,
But they have to be there, they can't be there.
I mean,
Good.
is there any explanation that you're aware of as to why these records are not here?
Not at all, none whatsoever.
Can I speak or?
Yeah, of course,
Okay,
if you
so
know anything about it.
I'm trying to figure out what she's talking about. The HH grant I bought, okay, I got my credit card and it's this furniture, the television, some of the other TV over there, the tables over there. They didn't go in my house, they came to the clubhouse. Some other things that she's talking about, the service contracts for the HOA rentals. Yes, I did buy them in my name. It was easier, this was like 3 years ago that I did that with a couple of the rentals, and then finally the office got a credit card, and then that happened, but we couldn't have a family move in without a service contract. So yes, and the board approved it, you know, at the time, so it said protocol. And it wasn't a service contract that was in my address or my home. It was a service contract for the rental properties. And I think I did that maybe a couple of times until the office finally got a credit card to start, you know, the process of covering the rental properties when malicious behavior was ever, you know, incurred there. It was all for the good of getting the property, you know, in order and with a family and them covered in their plans. So that's the explanation there.
Okay. Is there anything that you recall as a former or current board member about the rental documents that she was talking about?
When you're talking about rental documents, like
Like the leases and things like that?
They're all there.
You know, those,
Is that what was
I
missing?
mean, what are you looking for?
That's what I'm trying to understand what was
Right.
missing.
The lease
The
is
files
on
on which
file.
these came, there's more information in there.
Like what?
Yeah.
Well, there was an exclusivity agreement, there were things in there. Each one of the files has had its own file.
Is there a checklist of anything that we keep in files?
I mean, originally, when a property is acquired, you may have a checklist of things that needs to get done. You get a budget, things are done, things are approved, okay? Each home is conducted that manner. But
So-
we haven't acquired a home in quite a while.
So is the issue that there may be some concern about the files being incomplete, or is the issue that the files are completely missing and not?
You know, I think the issue is that I used
If you know.
my credit card to prepay, and then the association
Done with
refunded
that.
me.
We're done with that issue.
Okay,
What
yeah.
I'm talking about is
Making it-
the rental property files as
I
the,
don't think we really had a property file.
Okay.
I mean, we have a lease, so the management company has that. We try updating it every 12 months. Okay, what else do we do? We have a checklist on some of to make sure it's in compliance.
any service contracts
Yes.
for
A
property.
service
that-
contract, insurance,
file.
but that, the insurance company, you know, we don't really have a file. It's
Dan,
just
can I
we-
interject? I'm sorry, just to help you clarify,
It's really not appropriate.
because
But I,
they've got information that's
what
going on.
are these doing?
Yeah.
Welcome to my world.
Obviously, when we get to the public comment,
And here's my whole point. I am not saying, what I'm saying are that we did not, the HOA at that time did not have, in my opinion, controls, internal controls or oversight that would have prevented some of these issues. I am not pointing the finger at you saying you did it wrong. What I am saying is that while you were vice president or treasurer, okay, these things happen. I'm coming in now, 2015, and saying, you know what, we can make this better, we can make this stronger, we can provide more oversight so these things don't happen again.
I agree.
Okay,
There's
and
always
that's all we're doing
I do
here.
agree with that.
Okay.
And I do find that there's some work to be done on the financials, absolutely.
Okay,
I do.
good. So if I can
agree with that.
continue, and this is the point that I'm raising, why we should be doing this.
this is information on it that we don't know that we probably don't know what's going on.
Well, it's not going to happen if anybody's here.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We don't do that.
You can generally,
Then that's
you
okay.
can generally, here, let me have the rest of them.
Yes, please give
You
me
can
that.
generally explain the issue, and when I say generally explain the issue, put yourself in the audience's position so they understand the context of the issue without giving individual names or information.
Right. So basically, what we're doing, what this is additional documentation that came out of the records on other internal controls that we need to avoid, is all. Okay, so that's just it. There was just more documentation.
Another example of something that you noted in your review that
Right.
needs further discussion.
Right.
Is there anything else that you've noted? Well, let me ask you another question. When did you start your review?
About 8 months ago.
Okay, when did you start seeing documents that?
That a couple of days after I got elected.
Okay, so this is information that you've come across since the 12th of December.
Oh, absolutely. None of this information was provided. And the other thing that, well, it doesn't really matter, but the previous board now does keep all these records electronically. And as a homeowner, I have to tell you, I requested these documents that I'm now looking at and provided a jump drive in accordance to law that we can do, or homeowners can do to get information from their association, and was told